First, I want to take the motto of public broadcasting. Learn something new every day. Learn something new every day. Now, many times in these hallowed halls of aluminum, I hear students say, I just want to be practical. I don't want this technical stuff. I just want to learn to preach and to teach. I don't want to be a scholar. There's some supposed opposition between the practical and the technical. Just give me the basics. Don't give me that technical stuff. Don't give me the Greek, and don't give me the critical introductions to the Bible, and don't give me the counseling, the special student. Just give me the everyday stuff, the practical stuff. Well, surprisingly, the technical stuff turns up almost every day. But there is this supposed opposition between being practical and being technical, and I believe these statements have a false dichotomy. Wanting to be practical rather than being technical is like wanting to be homiletical rather than being biblical. You see, one's really the tool of the other. Homiletics is the tool of the biblical. And practical is the tool, the technicality is the tool of the practical. So before any biblical statement can become practical, it's got to be technically correct. The technicalities of the text have to be examined, and correct reasoning has to take place. And in fact, if it's not technically correct, then it's impractical. It cannot be practical. So its practicality depends on its technicality. And if not, then the blind are just leading the blind, and all we're saying is, I've got this good feeling in my heart, and I wish you'd have this feeling too. There's more to ministry than just being practical. We've got to study the technical. So every preacher ought to be the best scholar that he can be. And every scholar ought to be the best preacher that he can be. Now, my son George II had a sermon on Exodus chapter 4, verse 24 to 26. I don't want you to look at it. You can read it after. I don't even want to quote it. Well, I can't quote it. I don't want to read it. But read Exodus chapter 4 if you can't remember the verses, and when you come to this part, you'll know what I'm talking about. But there's something in that passage that gave him an idea for a sermon. And he preached a whole sermon on it, let alone just read it. He preached an entire sermon on Exodus chapter 4, verse 24 to 26. Now, I don't know what it was. I don't want to tell you the topic, but he read the text, he saw something technical in it, and he made a practical application. Well, developing these new insights after technically examining the text will revive your ministry. It will revive what you're trying to do, rejuvenate your ministry. So learn something new every day. But secondly, to revive your ministry, figure out why people aren't listening to you. Figure out why they're not responding to the gospel. After every sermon, when my wife and I were driving home, I'd always ask this question. I'd say, honey, if you were not a member of the church, if you were not a Christian and you heard that lesson, would you obey the gospel? Well, sometimes she'd say yes, Now, not every sermon has to be evangelistic, but in the background, that's what we're trying to do, isn't it? We're trying to save the lost. We're trying to tell people the way to heaven. We're trying to deal with the most emotional subject in the world. Well, there's been a lot of discussions about the invitation song. Do we have to have an invitation song at the end of every sermon? Even on Wednesday night, you have to have an invitation song. Well, some people have done away with the invitation song. Well, there is no invitation song in the New Testament. Billy Sunday, as far as I can find out, back in the early 1900s, popularized during a revival, singing a song to get people down the aisle. It's an American phenomenon. And, I used to think that stand and sing was, in the Bible. In Revelation chapter 22, verse 17, the Spirit and the bride say, come. Let him who hears come. Whoever is thirsty, let him come while we stand and sing. See, I just thought it was natural. That was in the Bible. Well, it's not. If you're in Africa, you might be standing up after the invitation song, or after the sermon. In England, you're probably going to have to contact somebody after service because there's no invitation song. So invitation songs are optional, but our concern for the lost is not. It even seems that some of our HCU campaigns are not as fruitful as they once were. So we need to think: why aren't people listening? What can we change? What can we do better? How can we reach the people that are not responding? Now, earlier this summer, I preached a lesson on Luke 14, verse 16 through 20. The text read in your hearing. But here you have people, the banquet's ready. Everything, he sends out the servant to invite people, and people start making an excuse. The businessman says, "Oh, well, I've got this tea. I've got to go look at it. I don't have time." And then the farmer says, "Oh, no, I've got 5 yoke of oxen. I got this new, John Deere tractor I need to try out. I don't have time." And then the married man says, I've got a wife, therefore I cannot. That's the only guy with a reason. No. They're all excuses. They're all excuses. And one excuse is as good as another. Now, in this lesson that I presented back in the summer, reasons why people don't respond, one reason is they think they can sin now and pay later. They think they can buy sin on the installment plan. In the Army, I met a soldier whose idea of fornication was, after a warm shower and a clean shirt, I'm as good as new. The sun shines just as bright. Life goes on. And that was his idea of the sin of fornication. It's all that you needed to do. You could sin now and pay later. Well, someone needed to teach him that's simply not the case. That's not true. Sin has immediate results. The sun might shine just as bright, but your relationship with God has changed. And it's like going to the doctor, and you're in for a checkup, and he comes back with bad news. He says, you've got a cancerous growth. Well, what's the first thing you say? Well, something wrong with your test. I'm healthy. I haven't been sick a day in my life. So redo the test. No. Doesn't matter what you have been. It matters what you are now. You got cancer now. I had cancer, didn't even know I had it. I went to Germany. I went all over the place. I went to buy a new car in Knoxville, Tennessee, and my son-in-law, who's a doctor, I'm at the car dealer trying to, get the price down. And he says, "George, you need to come to the office." And I said, "Why?" He said, "I'm buying a car." He says, "You need to come to the office now." Now, I went ahead and bought the car, but I ended up having surgery, for prostate cancer. So, sin has immediate result. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve knew that they talked with God in the cool of every day. But the day they sinned, what did they do? They hid themselves. They made clothes, or as Wayne knows, in one translation, they made breeches for themselves. But they were afraid to meet God. They knew He came every day in the cool of the day. And sin changed their perception of that. You can't buy sin on the installment plan. So how do you revive your ministry? Well, try to learn something new every day. Learn the technical with the practical. Let every scholar be a good preacher, and let every preacher be a good scholar. Develop new insights. Try to figure out why people aren't responding to your preaching, and try to renew your concern for the lost. Thank you.
Brother George?
Yes, sir.
We can turn that learning something new every day into an adventure.
Yes.
When you're going into a country you've never been before, you have a lot of expectations, and sometimes they turn out different. But you can turn that learning process into an adventure every day. That's what I do about my research and
Right.
restoration movement. I try to learn something every day that I didn't know.
There's one news channel, the guy asked, what did we learn today? I've learned that, hoarding's not half bad. I kind of
Yeah.